We should probably do some sort of introduction. Like, hi, everybody. I'm Patricia.
I'm Lee.
And we're weird as fuck.
Yeah, I suppose you probably should, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Because someday we might be famous. Okay. So. Seriously, dude. No porno voice. Let's just keep it. So how you doing?
Good. What kind of fucked up shit you got planned for this week?
Well, the boys and I were talking about, we were talking about a few different things. And somehow we got into the topic of heritage and the fact that your family is, has some Scandinavian heritage. And we have a little bit too. But, we have some great stories in general about the Vikings, but nothing really specific from that region. So there was a story that I'd heard about that I wanted to do some research on. And unfortunately, I conflated this guy with somebody else. So what I thought was going to be just like a really cool, wild, fucked up story turned out to be two really wild, fucked up stories. So I thought I would present them both to you and see what the people from that, because I think we tend to look back at the Vikings as, badass Scandinavians, but we see Scandinavians now as, they're pretty peaceful people. They don't go to war with other people like some nations I could mention. By and large, they're some of the happiest people in the world, and we think of them as being very peaceful, but that hasn't always been true.
Guess again.
Well, no, I mean, I think by and large, obviously there's crime and there's violence that happens there, but in general. So, like I said, I've got two stories that I thought I'd share with you that were just kind of wild and kind of out there, and I thought you'd get a kick out of them.
We'll get to it, baby.
So both of these stories take place back in the 1930s and 1940s during what was known as the Winter War. So the Soviet Union, as you know, the Soviet Union was never really anybody's friend. They were kind of out for whatever they were out for.
Yeah.
And in 1939, they decided that they wanted to annex part of Finland, to which Finland was not on board, clearly. And so they declared war and they set out to battle the Soviets for this, very strategic piece of property. The Winter War only lasted for 3 months. And in that 3 months, Finland lost approximately 25,000 troops, which was significant because the Finnish army was only about 300,000 men strong. But the Russians, or the Soviets, lost about 125,000. So the Finnish were badass little men. And it's into this sort of frigid, volatile, contentious climate that we meet a gentleman named Amo Koivunen. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly. I've heard it pronounced a couple of different ways. I've done my best. Imo was born in, I wrote 2017. I'm almost positive that that's not true. Imo was born in 1917 in Finland. And when he was a young man, at about age 20, he enlisted in the Finnish army. And he was not, by any account, a fabulous soldier. He was sort of mediocre. He didn't really seem to excel at anything, but bless his sweet little heart, he tried. He was on winter patrol. And as you can imagine, winter patrol in the Finnish army was probably a pretty brutal experience.
That's why he's mediocre, and that's why he gets the crap time.
Right. And that's probably why I would die. But he was part of the ski patrol. So being on winter patrol as part of the ski patrol, he would have been out there in heavy winter gear, heavy winter garb, the long white coats that they're famous for from World War II, thick, heavy gloves, thick boots, the long cross-country skis. Keep that in mind because that's important.
Okay.
Imagine young Imo, age 20, out in the wilderness, dressed like a giant snowman. And he's patrolling the Finnish-Soviet border, trying to prevent incursions of the Red Army. So they're there to pick off scouts and to make sure that if more than just a couple of guys are coming at them, that they get word to the army and they can move troops. But I'm always tired.
He took a nap.
No. No, he does quite the opposite, actually. 3 days into his mission, they were attacked and surrounded by Soviet forces. And they do manage to get away, but the ensuing trip to get away is exhausting. And he was tired to begin with. And so when they get to their destination, when they get away from the Soviet army and they stop to catch their breath, Imo decides that he needs a little help to stay awake and to keep up with the other members of his patrol. Now, in 1939, the Finnish had a very interesting way of keeping their soldiers awake.
Coke?
Crystal meth, actually.
Better.
It was, let me check my notes.
Here, have some meth. That'll get you going.
There's a specific name, Pervitin, for this drug.
Meth was out back then.
Methamphetamines have been around for a long time. Remember, back in the day, they used to sell over-the-counter cough medicine that had heroin in it. So, this...
Coca-Cola used to have Coke in it.
Cocaine in it.
Like, yeah.
Well, you could get... I shared with Colin a label for a cough medicine from back in the day, and it would kill me. I say that about a lot of things, but this would really kill me. It had cannabis oil. It had cocaine. It had morphine. I mean, it was... I was reading it and I thought...
I feel much better now.
You wouldn't be better, but you wouldn't care. Honestly. Yeah. So, not great stuff. But so they used Pervitin, which was essentially methamphetamines, to keep themselves awake. And the dosage for this was 1 to 2 pills. So you pop a couple of those, and you know what happens to tweakers when they take their meth. They're awake for days, and they have endless energy. Unfortunately, Imo is dressed in winter ski gear with giant gloves, and he can't get the box open. And once he does finally wrestle the box open, he can't get the pills out.
Take his gloves off.
So that little fucker took the entire box. 30 pills.
Holy shit.
And according to the story from his fellow patrol members, he went absolutely bug shit. Well, and I can imagine imagine, we've seen what happens to tweakers when they overdose. They hallucinate. They start screaming. And these guys are still being pursued by the Red Army.
I'm surprised he's not running through there naked or something.
They don't report whether or not he was running naked through there, but apparently he was making quite a fuss and he was freaking out, and they're trying to get him to calm down, and he finally passed out. And he was too big to carry, and a huge liability. Let's be entirely honest at this point. So the ski patrol booked it and left Imo in the snow.
I think he'd be dead taking all that. But...
The Finns are a sturdy people. When Imo woke up, because he did wake up, he was still really high.
I can imagine.
And he got up and he ran for it, or skied for it, as case would have it, because the Red Army is still coming after him, remember? And he has no idea where his patrol is. He knows that he's 250 miles away from help. And so he heads in the direction of help. And I don't know how far he got before he stepped on the landmine, but I found a couple of different reports. Once at 100 kilometers, 400 kilometers is the 250 miles. So he made it about a quarter of the way that he needed to go, according to reports, before he hit the landmine and was blasted into a ditch. And apparently it shredded his leg pretty badly. And he laid down in the ditch, preparing himself for death because he thought, this is it, I'm done. He did not die. After a while, some reports say about a week, some say just a few days, Imo decided, well, if I'm not going to die, I might as well get up and start moving. And so the little tweaker got up and continued to ski. And for the next several days, he's surviving on a raw bird that he managed to catch and gnaw on, pine buds, whatever he can get his hands on, until he finally skis into an Allied camp, 250 miles from where he started. When they got him, they said that his heart was still beating at about 200 beats per minute. And he was obviously shaken and weighed only 94 pounds, but he was still alive.
How the hell did he not bleed to death?
They're not sure how he survived any of it. He's the first documented case of a methamphetamine overdose by a soldier in the field. It should have killed him to take 15 times the dose of this medication.
Yeah, and his heart's beating that fast and you lose a leg, you think you'd be squirting all over the place and...
Well, I couldn't find from the reports whether it just shredded his leg and they were able to repair it, or if it completely blasted his leg off.
It must have been like from the knee down or something like that.
Well, even
Maybe
then you have
covered it up
arteries.
or did something.
Well, you'd have to put a tourniquet on it because you've got the main
he must have
pulmonary.
done
Is it the
something.
pulmonary artery that's in your thigh?
Yeah, because you bleed out nothing flat.
Yeah.
That,
Especially with your heart beating at 200 beats per minute.
yeah, that's
I would imagine the
insane.
cold probably helped.
Yeah.
Because it was really, really cold. But yeah, I mean,
I
he skied
guess
250 miles high on meth, eating pine buds and birds.
I guess if it was exposed, it would just freeze.
It might. I mean, that might be enough to get the blood to clot.
Yeah, if it freezes, it'll definitely clot it.
But not only did Imo survive, but the Finnish army rescued him and whisked him to a hospital where they patched him up and he lived to be 71 years old.
Tough fart.
And presumably never took drugs again.
Presumably.
Presumably. After that kind of experience, I would never, ever touch Pervitin or anything that even looked remotely like Pervitin. I wouldn't even take aspirin at that point.
Did almost keep him alive.
It might, well, if he hadn't taken it in the first place, he would probably have been better off. But
Yeah,
maybe he couldn't have run out because he did encounter a couple of times in that 250-mile trek. He did encounter the Red Army and he managed to get away. And it could have been because he was so high that he was able to just move fast enough to get away. But yeah, can you imagine taking that
crazy.
much meth and then trying to ski through? He fucking skied through Finland high. I mean, the pictures,
250 miles,
when you see the pictures of him afterwards, the dude's got crazy eyes. It's hysterical. He just looks like he's seen the face of God. But yeah, that was Imo. But Imo wasn't the only soldier in the Winter War with the Soviet Union that was worth mentioning.
Well, that one was weird as fuck. So
That one
let's
was.
see that.
This one isn't weird, but it's impressive as hell. And I conflated the two soldiers, thinking that the meth influenced this other soldier that we're going to talk about. And it didn't. This guy was stone cold sober and just impressive as hell. And I think you'll be able to appreciate him. So this guy was called the White Ghost. And I think his name is pronounced Simo Heha. I think that's how it was pronounced. But again, I cannot speak Finnish. And I'm very, very sorry to everyone who does. Because I suck. I'm a terrible, terrible person. Simo Heha was a Finnish sniper. And he is reportedly the most prolific sniper. Let me try that again. There are some rumors that I speak English. They have yet to be proven. Simo Heha is reportedly the most prolific sniper to have ever lived. Now, Chris Kyle, the sniper that we've seen all those movies about, and there have been all the reports, he's the guy that took down bin Laden. He was credited as having 150 confirmed kills.
That's a lot.
Yeah, he was an amateur. Simo Heha was reported to have had, according to Finnish official documents, between 505 and 542 confirmed kills during the Winter War, which only lasted 3 months.
He's a good shot.
He was a really, really good shot. When you consider that this was happening in 1939, and he didn't use a scope.
Yeah, he didn't have any of the fancy scopes, windies, nothing.
They did have pretty nice scopes back then. I mean, not the stuff that we have now, but Simo noted that when he was, because he took out Russian snipers. That was a big part of what he was ordered to do. The snipers that would take out the Finnish troops and that were protecting the convoys of arms and supplies that were coming in. But he noted that, especially when the sun was changing position at sunrise and sunset, he could see the reflection of the light off of their scopes, and that's how he would take some of them down. And so he decided that he was going to work only with the iron sights that were on his weapon.
And more impressive.
According to reports, he did this at distances of as much as 400 meters. So that's about 1,500 feet.
Yeah, that's a hell of a shot with a big scope.
With an iron sight. So Simo was born, yeah, I've got the right one, so in 1905. So by the time of the Winter War, he was about 34 years old. So this isn't a teenager with perfect vision. This is somebody who's lived. And the weapon that he preferred was the M91. And he preferred that, even though it was a more primitive weapon than the ones that were issued by the Finnish army, because that's the weapon that he had used all of his life. See, Simo was what Americans would call a country boy. He grew up sort of out in the Tules, well away from the cities, and he preferred to hunt and fish and go off on his own and just do things out in the wilderness. And so not only was he an accomplished hunter, but apparently one of his preferred things to hunt, especially when he was younger, were birds. And you've hunted pheasant and grouse, so you know how difficult it is to hit a bird in flight.
Yep. When I was a kid, I could shoot him with a .22.
And I'm sure the listeners and PETA will be thrilled to hear that.
And light a match with it.
Well, see, then you appreciate...
I was a country boy.
So you can appreciate Simo's skill. And that was one of the things when the Finnish army was recruiting, and apparently modern armies as well, when they're recruiting snipers, they look for people like that because you can train somebody to shoot a target. It's easy to shoot a target that's just sitting there doing nothing. But to actually hit a moving target is very difficult. And because Simo was such a prolific hunter, I mean, that was the way that he fed himself and his family. And because he was, so accustomed to shooting small mobile game like that, they didn't have to do as much training. He already knew how to adjust for the wind. He already knew how to adjust for the light, how to adjust for the curvature of the earth when you're shooting at a distance. Things like that.
That's why the open sights are actually better for something moving.
Exactly.
Much preferred.
But not only that, Simo had a few other tricks that he learned in the course of his duties with the Finnish army. So he knew how to track a moving target. And he knew how to, like I said, adjust for things like wind and rain and shadows. But he also learned, being in the Winter War, that the enemy could see not only the light glinting off of his scope if he were to use one, but they could see his breath. Not only the puffs of snow, you know how when it's a really fine powdered snow and you breathe, it kind of puffs up?
Yeah.
That was a problem. And also they could see the steam coming out of his mouth as he was breathing. So what he would do would be to wet the snow around where he was so that it would freeze solid. So no puffs. And then he'd sit there with snow in his mouth while he was waiting for his target to be identified. So imagine it's the middle of a Finnish winter. It's cold enough for the ground to freeze in front of you when you pour out your drinking water, and you've got ice in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And he would sit there for hours. He said sometimes an entire day, because he knew that there was a sniper but he didn't know exactly where. What he would do was come into the area. They would tell him that, we have a report of a sniper in this area. He would come into the area. He would scout around and determine where he thought, if he were to be stationed there, where would he go? What would be the best vantage point for him? And then he would find a vantage point where he could see all of those areas. And then he would wait. And it would sometimes take him an entire day to be able to determine exactly where his target was. And in one case, one of the very first targets that he was sent out after, his commanding officer had heard that he was a really good shot. They had a sniper that was harrying the troops. So they sent him up. He did exactly that. He scouted the area and he sat there for the entire day. And this soldier was reportedly the one that I was telling you about that was 300 or 400 yards away. And he sat there and he waited and he waited and he waited for hours. And finally, this guy decided apparently that the day was done. It was getting dark. He couldn't shoot in the dark because this was before we had infrared telescopes or sights. And so as he was getting up, Simo saw the reflection of the light on his scope and he shot the guy in the face at 400 yards, killing him instantly and impressing the CEO. And after that, he got more and more assignments until they were finally just telling him, these are the people, this is where, go get them. And he would go off on his own. And one of the benefits for him is Simo was only about 5 feet tall. So he was a little bitty guy, which made him a harder target. But also it made it easier for him to move and be undetected. And he learned to use the bombardments from the enemy troops. So if they were engaging the Finnish army in gunfire, he could use the noise and the chaos to change his position if necessary. And in addition to the other tricks, which made him almost impossible to find. In fact, it was the Soviet army, not the Finnish army, that started calling him the White Death. And not because he was a white dude, but because he was dressed all in white. To his benefit also, the Soviet army, for some reason, invaded Finland wearing camo. So
good idea.
So as a surprise to no one, they could be seen, which made it easier for him to hit them. But so terrified of this man's skill were they that on 2 separate occasions, they bombarded what they thought was his position. So in one occasion, they sent an entire hail of mortar fire. And it hit everywhere but where he was. So he basically just sat there and watched it come. And in another occasion, a bombardment of mortar fire and gunfire, and he got a boo-boo on his face, a little scratch. And they blew the back off of his new coat, which was kind of a bummer because it's cold. Now his ass was out in the wind, but he survived. Now, towards the end of the war, he did take a really serious injury. There was finally a sniper that was apparently as good as he was, and it blew off part of his face. Yeah, he lost, I want to say the left side jaw, his lower jaw. So the poor guy was in pain for the rest of his life, but he did survive. And he was taken to a Finnish hospital where he was able to recover. After the Winter War, Simo retired and he went back to his cabin in the woods to live a life in peace. But then the Finnish army allied with the Nazis because they figured that the Nazis were better than the Soviets as far as them losing their land. I guess they figured they could push the Nazis out. There was no real expectation from the Finns anyway that the Nazis were going to win the war, but they needed their military might to push the Soviets out of Finland. That was a really bad idea. Didn't work out well for them. That's a whole nother story. But Simo refused to ally himself with the Nazis, and he refused to be part of that plan. And so he noped out of that, and he retired, and he lived peacefully until 2002. But yeah, so imagine if you've got a 30-06 from your grandpa with iron sights, and you're taking an aim at a guy that's roughly 1,500 feet away. Do you think you could hit him in the face while he was moving?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Ego aside, I mean,
shoot a long ways with my 308. I mean,
yeah.
I can hit you with it.
Well, 308 would probably be
sight, but
a 308 is probably a better example than a 30-06.
What caliber that one is. But I don't know those guns very well, so.
I don't know either, but I do know that now one thing that I didn't interject that I probably should have is that he was an award-winning marksman even before the war. I'm sure they exaggerated it, but they said that he had, his entire cabin was filled with awards wall to wall.
Well, there's no doubt.
But
he's beyond uncommon as far as being able to shoot with iron sights that far. That's just, there are not too many people in the world that can do that. That
have ever been able to do that. And apparently, even into his old age, he was still hunting small game with the same weapon and being quite successful. He's something of a legend in Finland. But when I was first doing the research, I had the two conflated. So I thought that there was a meth-addled Finnish sniper out there that was slaughtering the enemy. And I thought, wow, that's a really weird story. Let's cover that one. But no, apparently there's just a meth-addled Finnish soldier who got lost and then a really prolific sniper who put the fear of God into the Soviet army. And unfortunately, the Finns did lose the Winter War, and they did lose 11% of Finland to the Soviet Union.
That's a lot of people.
11%, yeah. Well, 11% of Finland, not 11% of the population of Finland. One would assume that people were able to get out of Dodge before.
I would hope so.
Yeah, because I would prefer to be Finnish than Soviet. That's my personal. But yeah, those are the people that you come from. And it was fun because, in American history we cover the extremes, right? There's people who, like Annie Oakley, who could have maybe given Simo a run for his money. She was amazing.
Yeah, she was an amazing shot.
She was amazing. And, then of course we have so many drug-fueled rampages. I can't even keep track anymore. To his credit, though, the meth-addled Imo didn't apparently actually kill anybody. So
that's not a surprise. He seems very inept at the art.
You know what? Not everybody was born to be a soldier. Okay, I mean,
yep.
I can't believe he took the whole box. It's like, dude,
well, you can't take off his glove.
Well, even if you can't take off your glove, tip out a couple of pills. Don't take the whole thing.
I just guess he decided, fuck it, and put them all in, and off he went.
Yeah, well,
whee!
I kind of wonder, when his fellow troops said he went berserk. What exactly did that look like? And I don't know. I mean, if I at first when I heard that they ran off and left him, I thought that's cold, man. But then I thought also, if he's making that much noise, the Red Army can hear him.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not so unreasonable that they ran for it.
If he's running around like a crackhead, I mean, get you killed. Yeah.
Not like a crackhead.
Quick.
He was one of the first crackheads,
yes, but
for a few hours. Yeah.
I'd get rid of his ass.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, they can't help him.
Nope. You're on your own, bud.
Run that way. And he did.
Off he went.
250 miles through spit. Can you imagine that? Then he stepped on a landmine. Then he ate a raw bird.
I keep wanting to say that one cartoon I like to watch. We shouldn't say the name, I guess, but you know who I'm talking about. And he was acting like him.
Yeah, they've insulted a lot of people.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you can probably say South Park as long as you're not.
No, I'm talking like I am Cornholio.
Oh, Beavis and Butthead?
When he was taking all those pills and alcohol, and he was running around an airplane going, ah! That's what I would think he would be doing.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
I am Cornholio.
So those are just two anecdotal tales from the Finnish army during the Winter War. One that was hilarious and one that was just impressive. And both a little bit weird.
Weird as fuck.
And, we're coming up on Halloween. When this comes out, we might actually be after Halloween. And if we are, I'm sorry for not being timely enough, but I thought we'd do ghost stories next time.
Well, you can always push that one before the next one or something, so it's more timely.
Either you're about to hear ghost stories or you just heard ghost stories. Let us know what you think. Until then, thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye. Want to stay connected between shows? You can find us on Instagram at WeirdAsFCKPodcast, on Twitter at WeirdAsFuckPod1, on Facebook at WeirdAsFCKPodcast. Send us an email at weirdasfckpodcast@gmail.com, or come on over to our website at www.weirdasfck.com. There you can check out our blog, pick up some merch, look over our sources, and even share your weird experiences. You might even make it on a future episode. We would love to hear from you. Until then, tune in and keep it weird.